Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to WeRSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle. Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion with WeRSC columnists and staff writers. The pregame show is where we start. This is where we introduce our panel members of this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. We're going to give you the latest USC football news, but first, let's meet this week's panelists. Mark Culkin, WeRSC columnist who writes the Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season practice reports. Bruce Bagney, Chairman and CEO of WeRSC.com. Chris Arledge, former William Jewell College defensive back and team captain, and WeRSC columnist who writes the popular column Musings with Arledge. And that's me, Greg Katz, your host and moderator of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and a weekly WeRSC columnist who writes the obvious and the not so obvious and IMHO Sunday. Before we kick off, here is the latest USC football news, and there's a lot of it. On Monday, USC starting quarterback Jackson Dart entered the NCAA transfer portal, which appears to strengthen the inevitable public announcement that Oklahoma quarterback Caleb Williams has or will be transferring to USC. Caleb Williams' announcement may have been timed to precede Monday night's national championship game for national exposure. And this reminder, WeRSC's.com's Scott Schrader, our guru of recruiting, will have a recruiting video podcast special this week with inside information on the recruitment of Caleb Williams and Oklahoma wide receiver teammate Mario Williams, as well as updates on the approaching February signing period. We invite you to check out WeRSC's daily game for exact airtime of Schrader's recruiting special video cast. Again, that video cast will run sometime in the middle of the week. On Monday, USC head football coach Lincoln Riley officially named his 2022 coaching staff. We'll get more into the specifics in the second quarter of Inside the Trojans Huddle. In other news, on Monday, talented freshman tight end Michael Trigg entered the transfer portal. And on Saturday, modern-day wide receiver C.J. Williams announced at the All-American Bowl in San Antonio that he is signed with the Trojans over UCLA. Williams originally had committed to Notre Dame. And Trojans running back Keontae Ingram has announced he will participate in the NFLPA Bowl game, which means he's headed for the NFL draft, and his USC career has been completed. The Trojans have also received a transfer portal commitment from former Washington Husky wide receiver Terrell Bynum. Trojans recruited Bynum out of high school when he was a standout at Bellflower, California, St. John Bosco High. And controversial former USC offensive coordinator Graham Harrell has been hired as the OC at West Virginia.
Controversial. He was bad. He wasn't controversial.
It was terrible.
We're off to a roaring start.
They must like me.
Panel, let's kick off the first half of topics in our first quarter with the inevitable announcement that Caleb Williams has or will have transferred to USC, and Monday's announcement that Jackson Dart has entered the NCAA transfer portal. The question is, what are the ramifications and or domino effect of these events on the USC team and program? As we usually do, let's lead off with Mr. Mark Culkin. Mark, how do you see it?
What did Pete Carroll say when when USC won the Orange Bowl? We're just getting started. This is just the beginning of a pretty good exodus of players that's going to happen. And it's not really a bad thing. I mean, obviously, if Jackson Dart has already declared for the transfer portal, I'm going to go with my 99.99% confidence factor that, Caleb Williams is going to make it official that he's going to be a Trojan soon. You alluded to it at the top there, Greg, probably at some point during tonight's national championship game telecast. Perfect way to, keep USC, in the spotlight, still a little bit of thunder. And we're already seeing some domino effects of that. Michael Trigg has entered his name into the portal as well. So, maybe this is going to be a little bit of a, addition by subtraction. Lose Michael Trigg, gain a Mario Williams from Oklahoma to come along with Caleb. Those two had some really good chemistry playing catch with each other in Norman. So you're going to see a lot of players coming and going. Now, something I am a little concerned about, there has to be a balancing act here with, possibly looking to bringing in too many players. There are certain positions I think you want to tread lightly around. You've got a group of experienced players coming back on the offensive line that got better last year, significantly better. So, is it prudent to say, hey, starting left tackle at Oklahoma last year, you want to come on over? Do you want to chase away, would you have a 1.5 year starter at left tackle with Cortland Ford? Those are the type of things you do have to be concerned about when you're doing this wholesale type of, roster change, so to speak.
All righty. Chris Arledge, do you have concerns?
Yeah, I'm concerned that it's going to be more expensive to buy a ticket to the opening game than I thought it was going to be before.
Yeah.
Look, here's the thing. Let's assume for a second that Caleb Williams is going to announce very soon. And if he's not, Lincoln Riley has really screwed this thing up, right? Because he just ran off a really good or potentially really good quarterback. If he doesn't land his guy, we're in trouble. I don't think he's that dumb. Caleb Williams does a couple of things for you. Number one is he dramatically improves the roster just by his presence on it. Jackson Dart is a good football player. And I think, especially under Lincoln Riley, he would have been an all-conference type guy, maybe even a Heisman finalist type guy eventually. I think he had that kind of talent. Caleb Williams is what you hope Jackson Dart would become. He's already proven to be successful at that level. And whereas Jackson Dart was a guy who could move, he can't move the way Caleb Williams does. Caleb Williams is a guy who can, if you get out of your rush lanes, can go 80 yards for a touchdown. So number one, he gives you a legitimate Heisman candidate at quarterback right away. And that matters. But the bigger impact, I think, is what it means to the rest of the college football world, both high school players and players at other universities right now. Sean Cody always got a lot of credit for being the guy that sort of made it where it's okay to go play for Pete Carroll, because he was a big time recruit who chose USC when it wasn't clear that USC would be good yet. Caleb Williams is doing the same thing, but it's at a completely different level. Sean Cody was a good high school recruit and a defensive lineman. He was not a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback. All right. This changes the landscape of college football almost as much, not quite as much as what Lincoln Riley did, right? When Riley chooses USC, USC becomes relevant and players become interested. Certainly West Coast players. When Caleb Williams, a Floridian who was playing at Oklahoma, comes to USC, the whole country sort of looks at it and says, wow, I mean, that's a big move, because everybody wants that guy, everybody. And so if the rumors are true that Williams is going to bring other players with him, then this roster turnover that Lincoln Riley was trying to accomplish is greatly aided by Williams's presence. And then the last thing I think it tells you, I don't know whether the rumors are true, but I think what it tells you is that USC is going to be a real player in the NIL world. Because one of the concerns was that a lot of these other schools are making available, making possible big time money, right? Alabama's starting quarterback gets $1 million before he's actually done anything, right? You can't compete with that. You can't compete with Texas giving $150,000 to offensive linemen if you're not paying. It's not that it's all about the money, but let's be honest. If you have 3 or 4 finalists, all of whom have their attractive qualities, and one of you is going to pay $150,000, why wouldn't you choose that one? I'd choose that one too. So I think what this shows is that the NIL opportunities at USC are legitimate, and going forward, guys, that is really, really important in the future of this program. Because if it's not, if you can't come to USC and get your market value that you could get at Alabama or Texas or Ohio State, then you're going to lose out on the biggest recruits. And I don't care how good a coach Lincoln Riley is. The most important thing Lincoln Riley can do is have better players in his opposition. So I think this is, I'm sorry to see Jackson Dart go. I think he was a really talented kid, but the reality is that USC is trying to move up dramatically in the college football world, and getting Caleb Williams is a pretty good start.
Well, no question about that. Bruce, longtime USC fan. How does this Caleb Williams probable transfer and departure of Jackson Dart and guys coming in, guys coming out? How do you see it? How do you view it?
Well, I think it's exhilarating. Exhilarating. Chris Arledge last week and talked me off the old school ledge. And and now I'm recognizing this is just a whole new world. And it's an exciting new world, as evidenced by today only. I mean, this is really crazy. I think ultimately it will impact the stability of programs across the board, including SC potentially. But right now, when I look at this kid, Caleb Williams coming, and by the way, Mario Williams, the receiver, he's from Plant City, Florida. And I think you guys remember there was another Williams who was from Plant City, Florida, by the name of Mike, who to me is maybe the best receiver ever in our history. I love that guy, wonderful player. But no, I think it's crazy. I think it's, but it's almost a fitting thing for SC sitting in the entertainment capital of the world. And you know what, guys, we're going to be relevant again. And I hope to God tonight that they announce the Caleb Williams signing either right before that game tonight or during the game, like you were saying, Greg, because I'm going to tell you, I want to steal their thunder. SC is back, baby.
All right. Sounds good to, I think, all USC fans that are listening. My take on it is there is a lot of ramifications and they're all good. I think that the message will be sent tonight on national TV, I suspect, probably on the pregame shows, the halftime show. And I can't think of a better billboard than the timing of this. I really think that the USC fans, from a fan's perspective, has suffered so badly the last 10 years that they don't care about feelings of anything. They want a winner. They want it now. And, if Jackson is collateral damage, great kid, certainly would have been a good player at USC. That's just the way the ball bounces. I have no problem basically with a NFL mindset, not for long. I want to see SC bring in guys that are winners. I want to get rid of all the losers. I want to make sure that, if Oklahoma has 2 offensive tackles that are, really NFL future players, come on down. I don't care. I have sympathy for people like mentioned the name Cortland Ford, then compete. That's how it's always been when SC is good. Compete. Are you afraid of the competition? Now, I will say this. If I'm Jackson Dart, for me, I'm out of here. Because I think that there's such thing as competition and then there's pretend competition. I don't think that Caleb Williams is coming to SC to be backup for Jackson Dart. I think if you read and really spend some time reading about Caleb Williams, which I have done the last couple of days, he is a brand. He is a walking brand. He is promoting it. He's done it in Washington, D.C. from the time he was at Gonzaga College Prep High School. His dad's an entrepreneur, owns a gym training center in the Washington, D.C. area. And they are looking at branding. And I have no problem with the branding now. I'm all on board now. Look, nobody should outbrand USC when you're in Southern California, Hollywood. It's impossible. I don't care if it's Notre Dame, Ohio State. It ain't Hollywood, baby. And that's where it's going to all end up. And I figure you know, sometimes the best rules are no rules when it comes to the situation we're in now. The NCAA said, here's what you can do, boys, and SC's going with it. And I think that this Caleb Williams coming to SC is nothing but good. He'll take, even if SC's offensive line is average, he'll make them really good because he is that good. So, you know, when we look at it in hindsight, I think all of us would agree there is reason to have tremendous excitement. And like you guys, I can't wait to watch the national championship game and hear them talk about USC. That's a selfish homer view.
Greg, I think
All right.
Greg, I think the pros definitely outweigh the cons, but I think we do need to look at it from a roster perspective right now. With Jackson gone, and we're all assuming Caleb's coming, USC has 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster that were part of the same recruiting class, by the way. So there are some cons to look at, because you now have to find a quarterback or 2 to come in and fill in that roster to bridge until Malachi Nelson comes in 2023.
Didn't they have that problem already, Mark? I mean, that's what they had before Caleb Williams comes, right? I mean, essentially you switch out.
Well, but here's the thing, though. Lincoln Riley didn't recruit Jackson Dart and Miller Moss. He recruited Caleb Williams. So we talked about it. Caleb Williams is walking in as the de facto starter. Miller Moss was already second string. He wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
So we still have to find another quarterback to come in, but you now have a superstar in front of you and a superstar behind you that you have to come in and bridge between. And this is going to be, it's not just the quarterback position, because we're going to talk about this when we get to the running backs here soon. They need more personnel at other positions. That's more important than, hey, let's just go get portal transfers and improve what we have.
Listen, I haven't been able to be. I haven't been able to be at the practices, Mark, and you're there all the time. And I know we've got this guy Mo Hassan, who came from Miami. I guess he was seriously hurt, but I think he still could play another year, I believe, eligibility-wise. Is he a person who, I mean, as an absolute, last resort, could he come in and play and, assuming all the other pieces of the offense and defense?
Sure,
work?
why not? But, I haven't seen anything from him yet.
Yeah,
Guys, any college team that's down to their 3rd quarterback is in trouble. I mean,
Correct.
Look,
I'm talking about from a recruiting standpoint only.
Yeah,
sure.
and well, you already look. I think we already all agreed that Jackson Dart was going to be a pretty good player, probably a first-team all-conference level guy, right? So essentially, what you switched out is an all-conference level player for an all-American player. You have the same numbers and the same class spread. And the reality is, if you lose Caleb Williams, you're in trouble. Much the same way that Pete Carroll was in trouble when he would have a quarterback go down. I mean, there's always a drop off, right? I mean, I remember watching Sark win when Aaron Corp couldn't throw a pass, and because the starting quarterback, who happened to be a young kid, was out. So I'm with you, Mark. It's hard to recruit these days. It's hard to do what Pete did, where every single year just about he's bringing in a top quarterback, because Mark Sanchez isn't going to sit on the bench for a few years. Matt Leinart wasn't the same level recruit as Sanchez, but those guys disappear and they go somewhere else. But what it also means is that if you have to bridge Caleb Williams and Malachi Nelson, what you probably do is go bring in a 5th-year player, right? If you really had to do that, you bring in a 5th-year player from some. That's what everybody's doing. So you're right. You're right. It's just I don't see bringing in switching out a really good player for a great player is necessarily a bad thing in terms of roster makeup.
Yeah,
but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh no, all I was saying is, Greg was just saying it's all positive. There are some negatives, just we have to kind of keep in the background that as we're watching these turnstile, players coming and going. It's not going to be as easy as Chris, in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, buying gold from an era. Wide receivers and quarterbacks are everywhere out here in California, but there's a balancing act with the roster that I think we have to be concerned with. That's all I was.
No, that's fair.
Well, I think it's fair, and I think By the way, are you going to get into your little journey to Oklahoma and all the cool things that happened to you? You made a friend for life. You made a friend for life.
Listen, I'm not advertising that anymore because I'm just setting myself up as a victim for all
As a victim.
all the hucksters out there who are going to come up with some sad tale knowing that I'll give out money. So I'm not going to talk about that anymore.
Well, he's probably going to invite you over there.
I'm going to bury my Arab gold and call it a victory and leave it at that.
Oh, hey, listen, you may be invited over there, and they'll roll the red carpet out for you, buddy. I've been in the Middle East, so you can. Well, but aside from that, you did a good thing.
Yeah.
You did a good thing, man. It was a good deed.
All right, Katz, Mark already pointed out that your perspective on this was wrong. Are you gonna admit
Not
that it's
wrong,
not good?
not wrong.
Well, yeah, you did. And
It's just not all rainbows and Skittles.
hey, don't back up now. You went right after Katz. You went right after the juggler. You pointed out that his position was wrong, and I just want to know what Katz has to say about it.
I love you, Greg.
I was going to move on to the next quarter, but since you did leave that open, I really hate to do this to Mark. He's such a wonderful human being. He's a good little nebbish. Let me tell you something. The bottom line is the big winner of this is Miller Moss. And Miller Moss is the big winner because if things had stayed and let's say Jackson Dart didn't go, he would have been third string quarterback. And then he'd have to think about it. But now that Dart is probably gone, he moves up right behind Caleb. And we know on any given down, a player can go down, as Miller Moss found out at Cal, that you can be right in there. I think he's the least person that I think is going to leave. Now he's kind of caught in between the bridge between Caleb and Nelson coming in a year. But I think Miller Moss has the capability to mentally deal with it and hold the line as the transition of quarterbacks go. So I'm happy for Miller Moss. I remember his family members went to USC. I think his mother taught at SC. So I don't think he's going to be as inclined to go. And by the way, one last thing, and because we really have to move on, but I wouldn't shock me one bit if Jackson Dart ends up at Utah. I think that's a place that would work wonderful. It'd be around his family. I don't think he has any animosity against USC in general. I understand he just loves it. But, from a practical standpoint. Now, from a practical standpoint, we need to move on to the next quarter.
Yes.
Okay. Panel on Monday, Lincoln Riley released his 10-man coaching staff by position group and titles. For those of you that have not seen or read about it, let me briefly go over them for you. On offense, Josh Henson is the offensive coordinator, offensive line coach. He's 46 years old. He's coming from Texas A&M. Dennis Simmons, assistant head coach, wide receivers coach, and offensive passing game coordinator. He's 48 years old. He comes from Oklahoma. Dave Nichols is the inside wide receivers coach and associate head coach for offense. He's 45 years old. He's coming from Mississippi State. Kyle McDonald, although it's spelled Kiel, I've been told it's pronounced Kyle. Running back coach, 38 years old. He's coming from Utah. And Zach Hansen, tight ends coach, age 33. He's coming from Tulsa. On defense, Alex Grench, as you probably already know, defensive coordinator. He'll be in charge of safeties. He's 41 years old. He's coming from Oklahoma. Roy Manning, outside linebackers coach, Nichols coach, and assistant head coach for defense, 40 years old, coming from Oklahoma. Brian Odom, he'll be in charge of the inside linebacking and associate head coach for defense. He has a dual background in coaching linebackers and sports performance. His age is 40. He's coming from Oklahoma. Sean Nua, defensive line coach, 40 years old. He's coming from the University of Michigan. And of course, Dante Williams, defensive backs coach, also got the title of defensive passing game coordinator, 39 years old. We all know about Dante Williams, interim coach last year for Clay Helton. Now, the big question that I want to hear from you guys is, with the second quarter, who or what stands out to you regarding Lincoln Riley's first USC staff? Bruce Bagney, your thoughts, please.
Yes, a few points. If I look at kind of the common denominators here, the common themes, they're young, but they're very experienced. They come from, in most cases, from excellent programs. We don't have any guys coming in from, East Tennessee State or from, God forbid, Western Kentucky. These coaches are from many, in most cases, from major programs. They're young and aggressive guys who played college football. In some cases, it played in the NFL. And another common denominator among them, they are all said to be outstanding recruiters. So frankly, I couldn't be more thrilled about these guys. I think it's an excellent group that he selected. I think it was well worth waiting.
Chris, you're a former college defensive back. You probably know a good coach when you see it. What strikes you about this coaching staff?
Well, look, Bruce is right. This is a young, very young group. I mean, I think I might be the oldest guy on the staff if I were on this staff, and I'm very youthful, Greg. So, yeah, and they'll recruit well, which is obviously helpful. A couple of other things that stand out to me. One is no special teams coach, which I guess means that there's not going to be any room for John Baxter, which is going to be a disappointment for many of us. And in addition to that, you have three coaches coaching inside receivers, outside receivers, and tight ends. That's sort of an interesting distribution. I mean, in most offensive formations, you're going to have four guys that are receivers or tight ends in this offense. So you have three coaches dedicated to four positions. That's a little bit weird, and I'm not sure I understand it. Maybe part of that is that the tight end coach is also an offensive line coach, has been in the past, and so maybe you have another guy who can work with your offensive lineman if need be. So I'm not complaining about that. It just strikes me as a little bit odd, but I'm excited about this group. I think it's a group that's going to recruit extraordinarily well, and hopefully they'll coach as well as they recruit.
All right, Mark, what stands out to you about this group? What do you like? What do you don't like? Your assessment, please.
Yeah, as far as Chris being the oldest on the staff, I'm 6 years older than the oldest person on that staff. So, I think the common denominator is they're youthful. So I think they're going to have a huge benefit, on the recruiting trail, just being able to relate, to today's athlete, especially in light of NIL and so forth. Sean Nua coming over from Michigan. USC right now needs defensive linemen. He can say, hey, look, these are the guys I was coaching. Look how well this defensive line did while I was there. So Lincoln has put together a terrific staff. No complaints on that end. However, I am, going to keep an eye on the experience factor. They played football. They've coached at some nice programs. But, how much experience does this staff have of rebuilding a roster, a program of the magnitude of USC? And are they going to be able to get it done? Where are they going to pull that experience from? When Lincoln Riley got to Oklahoma, that program was running. It was doing really well, and he kind of just took over from there. But as Chris pointed out, three offensive coaches, dedicated to receiving, that doesn't really paint the picture of being a physical team right now, at least on the offensive side of the ball. So I hold that concern as well. So I'm just going to kind of go in this eyes wide open right now and see what Riley has to do with the staff, hopefully in the spring.
Well, I'm not as skeptical as Mark. I like the makeup of the staff. They all come from winning programs, which is, if you're going to have a winning culture, they better be coming from winning programs. The only one that, as a person who would say Tulsa, he's coming from Tulsa. But I tell you, the Michigan hire was very important to me, because not only is Michigan a brand name, not only was Michigan in the Final Four, not only was Michigan's defense, a lot of the spotlight was on the two defensive ends. Now, I'm not saying that Nua coached those guys directly, because it's possible that they had defensive end coaches or edge coaches, but he was certainly involved in the process and deserves the recognition. I think that they're young. It doesn't bother me at all. Look, you can't have a good team unless you got good players. You need coaches, young coaches that are enthusiastic, that are go-getters. I think Lincoln Riley hired guys on that basis. I saw a lot of good things. I'm not worried about the coaching thing because of where they're coming from. The guys from Oklahoma, they know Lincoln Riley. They've had success, so they know it. Michigan guys had success. He knows it. Maybe the youngest guy, the tight end coach, is somebody who's probably maybe got to learn some more learning to do, but he'll learn along the way. It's certainly not like what we're used to. I mean, assistant coaches, I think that Clay Helton had a Rolodex of one card, with family names, and that was about it. So
Western Kentucky.
yeah, and my thing is, and I'll wrap this part up. I'm happy. Did he get everybody he wanted on number one? Probably not. He probably wanted Beatonbow from Oklahoma if he could get him. But you know what? So what? He got a guy that's really got a great reputation as an offensive line coach, experienced. And I will say this about, with Mark, I'll agree with this. They're going to have to go out and get offensive and defensive linemen. I'm concerned about sustaining offensive linemen. You can have the greatest guys. You can have, Raleek Brown in your running back. You can have, Kelly Williams. You can have all these great skill players. SC's always had outstanding skill players for the most part. But we all know that it's those linemen that make the big difference. Unless we can recruit those guys, it's going to be a challenge once we get out of the Pac-12. So we'll see how that goes. So with that being said, let's move on to halftime. Your question, panel, is as we start 2022 with Lincoln Riley and his staff, who do you think is USC's greatest recruiting threat or challenge? Bruce, how do you see it?
The only threat I see is SC being their own threat, their own worst enemy potentially. Look, if we start to hit on all cylinders again, with the way that we think they will, it may take a year or two to really get rolling. SC recruits itself. We will reestablish ourselves with the Boscos and the Mater Days and the Sarahs, et cetera. We've got a much better reach now as a result of Riley coming in terms of Texas and maybe moving into the SEC area. So frankly, I don't fear any of them. And I think it's about time that we, put our fence around our Southern California and reassert our hegemony, which I believe we will.
Okay, Mark, what do you think? You know recruiting in and out. What's your thoughts?
I don't think it's a who. It's a matter of, is USC ready to roll out their NIL plan? They've been talking about it. It's time to start putting it into action. We've talked about this before on the show this week, weeks previous. If you want to compete for the big guys, they're already saying, what can you do for me? So you're going to have to show them the checkbook, show them what their value is, and convince them that they're going to get that playing in LA. That's really what it comes down to. It's not a matter of, USC recruits itself. USC's got the staff to recruit whomever they want to go get. But when you're competing against programs who are not shy about saying, hey, we've got this NIL program over here. You're an offensive lineman. We're going to put $150,000 in the bank for you right here. When you sign up in February or early signing period, whenever, you'll be able to start using this to your advantage. That's what they're up against. It's not who, it's what.
You agree with that, Chris Arledge?
Yeah, Mark's right about that. I'm not worried about the NIL program, even though we don't know any details of what USC is telling recruits, largely because this is not something that Lincoln Riley forgot to think about before he came to USC. And so when he comes to USC, and it's his expectation that he can very quickly turn around the roster and very quickly have a roster that's better than what he had at OU, and his rosters at OU were good. he does that because he believes USC is going to be able to compete on the NIL front, right? And he staked his career on it. So I'm comfortable that USC will be able to do that, and that they're committed to doing it, because otherwise Lincoln Riley wouldn't be here. Look, USC is going to be able to lock down the West Coast. They won't win every recruiting battle on the West Coast, but they're going to win almost all of them, because that's what happens when USC is doing things right. They're still going to have to pull a few guys, big guys, from other parts of the country. I think Lincoln Riley has the reach as a recruiter and has a staff of guys who know Texas, for example, so you can do that. So I'm not worried about the ability to recruit. I think the biggest challenge is keeping the peace and keeping harmony on the team. It's always been the case in football that there are some players that are bigger stars than others, right? The starting quarterback is always a bigger deal than the punter. And so, but this gets magnified tenfold when you're talking about guys making lots of money and other guys not making any money. If you go back and think about that Matt Leinart, Matt Castle competition, which was very close, and it's only in retrospect you say, well, of course, Leinart's one of the greatest college quarterbacks of all time. That wasn't obvious to anybody at the time, and I'm not sure it was an obvious call for the coaching staff. But you think about a move like that today has significant ramifications, right, in terms of how much money these guys are going to make. That makes, in today's world, that move makes Leinart a millionaire. And it means that Castle is still going to is going to be living like a college student, like most of us did, right? He's going to be going to Taco Bell, and Matt Leinart's going to be driving a new Mercedes. That's what you have to deal with. Pro coaches have dealt with this for a very long time, right? I mean, one of the reasons Phil Jackson was so great wasn't necessarily the X's and O's of it. It's because he could take Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal and a supporting cast and get them to work together well enough, even if they didn't like each other. That's going to become an important skill for college head coaches now, because you're going to have to find a way to keep locker room peace and to keep the envy and other things at a minimum, such that these guys can go out and play as a team. And that's going to be hard.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is going to be in the wins and loss column. I think the challenge in recruiting will be showing players that are recruitable that USC is on the road back, that they've gone from 4-8 to 8-4 or 9-3, hopefully. They have to be, players are going to watch those games on Monday night, and they're going to see Georgia and Alabama. And that's what they're going to see. And before that, they saw Michigan and even Cincinnati. And SC has to put themselves in a position where you can only go so far on individual NILs. You can only go so far in promoting your brand. When you think of branding with Alabama, what do you think of? National championships. Okay, you think of Nick Saban. And I think all the rest of it falls in line. But to me, the big recruiting challenge is to show these recruits that there is a championship culture, and it's being proven in front of their eyes on television. So we'll see how this all plays out. Before we begin the second half, I want to remind everyone that's watching or listening that you're watching or listening to We Are SC's Inside the Trojans Huddle with this week's panelists, Mark Culkin, Chris Arledge, Bruce Bagney, and your moderator here, Greg Katz. We encourage you to check out wearesc.com, part of the On3 network, and become a subscriber to the best coverage of USC football and Trojans athletics. All right, third quarter. Panel, we begin the second half kickoff in the third quarter with the announcement last week that Keontae Ingram, running back, will be going to the NFL. The Trojans are down to two returning scholarship running backs in Darwin Barlow and Brandon Campbell. How concerned are you with the quality and depth of the running back position for 2022? Chris, what is your level of concern?
It's pretty high, other than the fact that I'm convinced that Lincoln Riley is going to bring in at least one transfer running back. I mean, he has to. You can't have two scholarship running backs before the season starts. That's a position that just gets way too beat up. I like both of those guys. I think they're both promising players, but you can't have two guys. So he's going to bring somebody else in. He may bring a couple somebodies in, and you can get away with that at running back, because at running back, at running back, guys understand that that you're probably going to have a committee approach, and so that's not necessarily going to scare off the two guys we have the way it happens at quarterback. But yeah, he needs more good bodies. There's no question about it.
Bruce, you grew up in an era where running backs, Heisman Trophy running backs were the norm. And here we are today wondering if whether SC has enough running backs and maybe quality. What's your level of concern with 2022?
Not terribly high. Here's why. First of all, I think the two players that Chris mentioned, I think are very solid players. Raleek Brown, while not a big guy, is a guy who is going to make an impact. I think that there are several sources that will be evaluated and looked at, if you will, by the coach. One of them's the portal. As Chris mentioned, I just for what it's worth, I went in and took a look at the portal today, and I found a number of interesting guys. One, a guy from Texas A&M, DeAndre Jackson, 230-pound redshirt freshman, 3-star in high school. Interesting guy from Tennessee, D. Beckwith. Get this, 6'5", 220. A redshirt freshman, a 4-star out of high school, and a guy named Kai Thomas, who was a leading rusher for Minnesota, a 4-star, 5'11", 205. And then I look at, in addition to that, I look at our current team. We've got guys on our team who have played running back and who could play running back. And just a couple, well, one is this kid, Colombo, who played at Bosco. He was a walk-on. He played in a couple games this year. He's a decent little player. And we've got this guy named Prophet Brown, who apparently was a very good high school running back. And then the question mark, and maybe he's gone forever, is that Keenan Crispin. I don't know where that stands now. Maybe he's gone, but I think he will find, back to Chris's point, he will find others. And I'm just not terribly worried about it.
All right. Well, I will throw my 2 cents in. I have concern, but knowing and watching Lincoln Riley's offense, a lot of fly sweeps, a lot of, where you don't need a 225-pounder pounding away. I'm sure that they're going to look for a big back. They need to pick up 2 more backs, in my opinion. I think 2 big backs to offset the other ones. Although I will say that Darwin is a good physical back, and I like Campbell. But they need that home run threat. They'll get that, of course, in Raleek Brown, who will play a lot, I believe, in the fall. But they need another one, or at least one quick back and one big back. It's possible that a guy like Darwin Barrow could, develop into a big back that could bulk him up even more. So it is something I think that there is concern, and it needs to be monitored. But I think that they'll probably fill the gap on that one. So moving along here, one of my favorite spots, of course, is we're going to head into the 4th quarter. So let's first do the symbolic lighting of the torch, and I'm going to be very careful how I do it this time, since I was panned pretty much by the staff last time with some adult humor. But keeping that in mind, Chris, I know that you got a big kick out of that, because I think it was you that questioned it. But
Everybody questioned it, Greg. Some people were willing to talk about it, some people weren't. We all questioned it.
The truth is, Chris, I'll do anything for ratings and numbers. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm just not sure you're moving the right direction there, Greg.
And I think you're probably right. So as I light the candle, just all do me a favor, just hum the first stanza of the William Tell Overture, and I'll be happy. All right. 4th quarter. What will be the biggest USC football sports story in 2022? Let's go to our first savant, Mark Culkin. What do you think it's going to be?
The obvious. USC has a new head coach. They're serious about playing football, and they were able to win 9 games. Okay.
I
I don't know how else to answer that. I need to see the roster before I go any further than, let's just hope for 9 wins. That would be a huge talking point at the end of the season.
All right, Chris Arledge, what will be the biggest USC football sports story in 2022?
I'm going to go a slightly different direction. Although I agree with Mark, I think Lincoln Riley's likely to put together a much better roster that is much better coached than last year, and I think they have a legitimate chance to compete for the Pac-10, Pac-12 title. Pac-10. I keep trying to throw out 2 teams.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not going to stop doing that. But
Good.
I think it's different. I think USC becomes relevant and interesting again, such that, I mean, you could watch ESPN and never hear anything about USC the last couple of years. USC is going to be talked about. We're going to be hated again, especially if Caleb Williams comes and brings a bunch of OU players, and if people from other schools come over, especially if details start leaking out about how much money Caleb Williams thinks he's going to make. There are going to be a lot of people who are unhappy and frightened, because USC has been doing its best to make it so that Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State can come in and take the best players out of Southern California. Teams like Utah and Oregon can compete for and win Pac-12 titles, because USC has been an absolute train wreck. And there are going to be some people that are a little bit worried about what's coming down the tracks. And what's coming down the tracks is a train, Greg. That's what it is. That's what the light is. Lincoln Riley's bringing the freight train. He's going to run over some people, and I can't wait to see it.
You know, it's amazing how you've turned 180 degrees during the dark years, dark months. You were the prince of pessimism. Now you're the weight of optimism.
Dark months. It was years, as you said the first time. And look, I was always very open about what I thought the primary problem was with USC football. Once they solved that problem, it changed my whole perspective.
And indeed you did. Now, Bruce, have you changed your perspective? What will be the USC's football sports story of 2022?
Well, let me just start off by today. I ordered my season tickets and became a member of the committee again, which is one of the support groups. So I'm serious. I live in Florida, as we discussed last week, and I'm willing to make the trip 8, 9 times, whatever the total number is, to see the Trojans play. I'm that excited about it. I think what's going to happen is, although I continue to have some issues and about, the front 7 on defense, I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the physicality and the running game and all that. But I'll tell you one thing I'm not worried about, and that is SC's ability to score points and score a lot of points and be exciting for a change. One of the things that I just wanted to touch on that we've underachieved on for years is a damn return game. We have been terrible in the return game. It's been a number of years since we've actually had any returns for touchdowns that weren't called back. I'm excited about that. With guys like Raleek Brown, with Domani Jackson, and with Gary Bryant. And I think these coaches, and one of the things in the coaching, they don't mention the special teams coach, but I have a feeling one of those the receiver coaches is going to be in charge of the special teams. And I think they give them that title so they can pay him more money. That's what I think. But I'm very encouraged by this. And I think we're going to, listen, let me just say this other thing that I talked about last week. Damned SEC, okay? Been down here, I've lived here since 1992. And all I hear is the SEC, this and that and so forth. And we have been, and they have really stuck it to me. My next door neighbor is a big Florida guy. The guy next to him is a Georgia guy, etc. And by God, it is time for retribution.
You need to be in a new neighborhood, Bruce.
I didn't move back out there.
That's a terrible street. Well, I don't know if you want to do that and pay all the money.
I should point out that our panel, Bruce is in Jacksonville, Florida, and Chris is in Dallas, Texas, in that area. So we are a national brand of panelists. And when Kevin Bruce is with us, he's also from Dallas. So we've got the country covered. So when Bruce talks about life in the SEC, he's speaking from experience on that one. So
Yes, sir.
I'll say,
And I think Mark is moving to Wisconsin to expand our geographic scope. So thank you, Mark, for doing that for us.
I used to live in Arizona and I made the trip every weekend for home games.
That's serious, a serious fan. Love it.
well, I will say that the biggest USC sports story in 2022 will be the turnaround wins and losses that will catch everybody's eyes. I think if they go from 4-8 to 8-4, the excitement level will really go. I suspect we'll go to a bowl game next year. I suspect we'll probably win a bowl game next year if we're not, suited against somebody we're not quite at that level yet. But it wouldn't shock me that by the end of the year that the SC team is pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. And in the Pac-12, we know the Pac-12 was not very good in bowl games, which is an indication that, you get a few lucky bounces here or there. SC could very well be deep in the mix to win the Pac-12, and wouldn't that be something else? So we'll find out how it all plays out. And finally, panel, we're in overtime, and we have a story that broke today. It appears that the College Football Playoff Expansion Committee has hit a snag, an impasse, and theoretically, no expansion could happen, may not take place until 2026 season. Based on that possibility, and hopefully that's not going to happen, that cooler minds will prevail. We're seeing a lot of selfishness on behalf of other conferences. They're not going for what's best for college football, but strictly sticking their feet deep into the sand for their own preservation. How do you see this affecting USC in particular if they don't get it where the playoff is expanded? Mark, what do you think?
I think this is just a bunch of posturing right now. Until the TV networks start, getting in the middle and negotiating a little bit stronger, getting this thing pointed in the right direction, I don't really care what Greg Sankey has to say.
Greg Sankey is the commissioner of the SEC.
Right. So I think that's who you were alluding to, from the digging their heels in the sand. So whatever, I think we're going to see playoff expansion sooner than 2026 or whatever the year you gave was. Give us 2 more years, and I think by 2023 that number will probably jump to 8 teams.
Okay, now Chris, thoughts on the expansion impasse, and maybe even asking you what you prefer as far as a format in terms of numbers of teams. What say you?
Yeah, I think they'll figure it out eventually. There's too much money not to. And I'm sure the SEC commissioner does like the idea that, for example, you won't have conference winners with a guaranteed bid, because he's hoping you can get 3, 4, 5 SEC teams in the tournament. But they'll work it out. I think they'll probably work it out with conference winners getting an automatic bid. And I think that's just right. Frankly, it's good for college football, because that means that the big programs can be more aggressive at playing other big programs, because they know that loss doesn't hurt them. They can still win their conference and get in. In terms of how big it should be 8 teams. 12 never made any sense. First of all, teams number 11 and 12 don't have a chance to win the college football playoff anyway. This isn't college basketball. In football, they don't have a chance. And on top of that, I don't like that some teams are getting buys and others are not. 12 doesn't make any sense. It's 8 teams, 5 conference winners if you still count the Big 12 as a major conference, and then a handful of at large. That's the way it should be. I think that's probably how it ends up.
All right, that's an interesting a viewpoint. Bruce, what do you think about what's going on?
Well, I think that, yeah, it ultimately is all about money. I have a lot of faith in, I don't pronounce his name correctly, George Kliavkoff, is the way you pronounce it?
Kliavkoff.
I have a lot of confidence in this guy from the people I've talked to who know him, who've been around and worked with him. this guy, I think, is going to be a major factor for us in terms of advocating for the conference and for making us, better, look better, get a better TV deals, et cetera. I think 8, by the way, is probably a good number, Chris. That makes sense to me. But the other point that we had on the agenda that we're not going to talk about, and that is all these bowl games that are played. And one of the ways I think to reinvigorate many of these bowl games is to make it an 18 playoff. So you're not just playing in the in whatever the Weed Eater Bowl or whatever in Michigan, but the eight teams are playing in significant bowl games. And that should re-enliven or reinvigorate these bowls and make them more meaningful. Because right now, I mean, who cares? Hell, I don't even watch them for the most part. They're just pretty boring. And they're good for the kids maybe because they like to go to. It's a good thing for them to work for, and I don't want to take that away from anybody. But I think it could really give us give the bowl system a boost if we went to 8.
I definitely hope we reinvigorate the Pull and Weed Eater Bowl. I mean, I'm with Bruce on that.
You are giving that one, yeah.
In terms of priorities, that's probably number 2 or 3 for me.
Did your school play in that, by the way?
No, we weren't good enough to play in a bowl like that.
All right. Anybody else have anything to add on this? Otherwise, I'll throw my 2 cents into it, and we'll be done for the day here. All right. I think that, and I have already written columns on this. I would like to see expanded to 12 teams. I think that each conference should get an automatic bid. Believe it or not, in what I read today, there are actually conferences that don't think that's a good idea, getting an automatic bid. The group of 5 thinks it's being left out because it's being called the group of 5. So to me, I agree with all of you guys. It's all about the money. They sweeten the pot enough. No one's going to be able to say no. So hopefully they'll get it worked out. I would like to see a playoff within the next 2 years. I think it's ludicrous the way it is right now. I'm glad I don't live in the SEC country because I know it must be unbearable for Bruce to have to listen to it every year.
Yes, it is.
But it is what it is. So on that note, until next Tuesday, I want to thank you all, the panelists, and I want to thank all of you for watching or listening on a podcast to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Until then, we'd like to wish you all a very pleasant week. We'll all wait for the announcement of Caleb Williams. And until then, fight on, everybody.
Fight on.